our distinguished speaker, Professor Shashwat Alok. Professor Alok is an Associate Professor of Finance at the Indian School of Business. He joined ISB in 2013 after earning his PhD in Finance from the Olin Business School at Washington University in St. Louis, where he was recognized for academic excellence and scholarly promise. At ISB, Professor Alok serves as the Research Director of the Digital Identity Research Initiative, and his work bridges rigorous academic research with real-world policy relevance. His research focuses on critical issues in corporate finance, including the role of law, government policy, institutions, fintech, and alternative data in shaping firm behavior and financial inclusion, especially in emerging markets. His scholarship has been accepted at leading international conferences and published in top-tier journals, as well as being cited in influential policy documents such as Indian Economic Survey and Reserve Bank of India's Household Finance Committee report, a testament in both its academic merit and societal impact. Professor Alok's work also addresses important contemporary challenges such as climate finance, innovation, and the intersection of financial systems with broader socio-economic outcomes, making his insights particularly valuable for our theme today. Please join me in welcoming Professor Shashwat Alok.
Thank you, Riya, and other conference organizers for inviting me for this talk. By nature, I'm an introvert. I'm also a little bit nervous. I tend to speak very fast, not because I want to, that's how God made me. So if you don't get me, it's not you. Now, I did get a scolding from my wife because I had to come here, she had some job today. And when Riya emailed me, so I'll talk a little bit about serendipity today and how serendipity is important for building a research pipeline. When Riya made, for the last 10-12 years, it was a pretty stressful period as it was for most academics. I was focused mostly on building a research pipeline, and as you will see, the pipeline was not planned early in advance. But I have been wondering what do I need to do next, especially because I have a 3-year-old daughter and I care about her future, and to that extent I care about India's future, because if India doesn't grow, she will not have a lot of opportunities. And part of it, in a very, very small way, I thought I want to interact a lot more with PhD students and academics from my area across India. And that is right exactly when Riya emailed me and said, can you give a talk? I said yes without reading the email carefully. I am very comfortable now, not very, but reasonably comfortable giving talks on my research paper. But this talk was not about a research paper, it was about the art of building a research pipeline. And then I wondered later in December when I finally figured out that I need to give this talk, that why am I the right person for this role? Because I never had a grand plan. I didn't have a 5-year or 10-year vision for building a research pipeline. So if this talk is going to be a little bit about my research, but mostly about how I survived academia without having a grand plan or grand vision. So why am I here and why am I the right person for this talk? Only because Riya invited me and she thinks so. No other reasons. And maybe because, there are obviously geniuses in any field, they are outliers, but for most people, you are still figuring it out. I think I'm still figuring out my research identity and my research pipeline. So maybe for the median researcher and academic, my journey is maybe can teach you a little bit about how to build a research pipeline. I was not planning to do this, but I'll do this because whatever Professor Sugato mentioned, that students find some aspects of my life funny. So when I started teaching at ISB, as I said, I was an introvert. I wasn't very comfortable teaching a bunch of smart students. And also I realized that in India, everybody wants to know what is going on in your life, but nobody wants to spend time and Google about you. All academics have a website, but the students don't ever look at it. And so the students would complain that we don't know enough about you. So what do? I don't like speaking extempore. So I prepared a set of slides on my life. I'll just spend time on 2-3, mostly because they are very important parts of my life, but also it tells you something about how serendipity is going to be important in your academic careers as well. Let me start with the most important aspects. In many ways, they have been the defining aspects of who am I today. She's Nova. Oh, by the way, she was with me during my PhD days in the US. I used to volunteer for a rescue shelter there. And then she came with me all the way South Samandar part to India. Last year she passed away because of old age. I obviously miss her. She was my friend, therapist, daughter. Most people outside academia, and that is going to continue by the way, don't know what you all do. They think that we have a beautiful life, we live on a beautiful campus, watch trees and birds fly. Obviously, like any other profession, we don't have a work-life balance. When my daughter was born, I also lost my sleep. Now, as I said, they are the most important aspects of my life. Because I have two daughters, I also have a wife, and yes, I love her too. So I graduated from MIT in computer science in 2008, amongst the top of the class. At that point, I wasn't sure I want to become an academic. Okay, so I wasn't sure what I want to do with my life. What I was sure is I don't want to get into a job. I want to go abroad for higher studies. I grew up my early days in Bihar, and there was a huge robbery at my place, so we lost a lot of money. So I didn't want to burden my parents with the expense of foreign education. So the only reason I applied for a PhD is because I knew in the US, if you get to a PhD program, they will fund your education. So they give you stipend for living and your tuition is waived off. That was the only reason. It was not a well thought out plan. And I was graduating in computer science, but I applied for a PhD in finance as well. And the only reason was that this was a time when everybody was becoming investment banker and making millions on the Wall Street. So that was the motivation. I got through both finance programs and computer science programs. I chose finance because I thought I'll be a billionaire on the Wall Street in New York. I landed in the US in July of 2013. In August, Lehman Brothers collapsed. Not because of me. It's not causation. But luckily for me, I fell in love with academia. I sometimes do wonder about that decision. That younger me fell in love with academia. There are obviously aspects of academia that I like, but like everybody else, I also have a midlife crisis. I figured out that, one, I like interacting with smart people. You get to learn a lot through all of these interactions. The last couple of days have been quite interesting as well. Also, as an introvert, the financial industry was not really well suited for me. I like being by myself. I like spending time with myself, and academia is very well suited for that. Until you graduate, you are going to graduate soon, and then you have to go and network and give your talks at conferences, teach for life. That part I had not internalized, but you get used to that as well. I graduated in 2013. I chose not to become a banker. I wanted to come back to India, so I came and joined ISB. I have been based out of the Hyderabad campus for 12 years now. It's the only job I've had. I don't have any real world experience. My only experience is academic. As you all know, in academia, there is not no real work-life balance. At ISB, teaching is important, but a lot more importance is placed on research. And judging research is very, very difficult. By design, it is intangible. So schools have come up with a metric, whether good or bad. We do need some ways to appraise performance. And so the way they judge performance is whether you are publishing in ABDC, AA, star. Different schools have different criteria. At ISB right now, the bars have been going up. In finance, the top 3 journals are Review of Financial Studies, Journal of Financial Economics, and Journal of Finance. So these are the journals that you're expected to publish. If you don't, then you're not supposedly creating new knowledge. It is what it is. It is a high bar, which is why a lot of us go forward. Now, a lot of my research today focuses on digitization, fintech, and financial inclusion, motivated by the context around us. At least one space in which India has leapfrogged the world is in building digital public infrastructure. Now, whether it will create positive economic growth or not, that remains to be seen. But we have leapfrogged the world when it comes to building the technology. Now, there is either a bias or lack of interest in figuring out what is happening in India. Like if you have a study on J&K or Delhi on Bihar, why would a researcher sitting in the US care about it? And so for a while I was a little angry with the broader academic world at why every paper being published on the US, the marginal value of a new insight in the US is very low. The marginal insight of a new value of a new insight on India or China is significantly higher because we are at different stage of growth. And then I realized that when you have something useful to teach, people start caring. The reason people did not care a lot about our research is it was not relevant for them. The findings were not relevant for them. Now in fintech, because there is a lot more activity happening in India, UPI is a very small, simple technology, but nobody else had it, and at this scale. So people are interested in now knowing how was India able to implement such a technology? How did this rapid adoption happen, despite very low levels of financial literacy and digital literacy? So at least for my career, the DPI has been very good. And so as a result, my research on those aspects do get invitations from across the world, from World Bank, BIS, etc. Now, one caveat in my story is that is MIT Manipal. I'm not MIT Massachusetts. And MIT is a beautiful place. Sorry, Manipal is a beautiful place. Massachusetts may also be beautiful, but I couldn't care less about that city. So one reason I studied in academia was I thought that it suits my personality. The second was I was young and naive and ambitious, and I thought that my advisor Radha Gopalan, very nice person, he passed away at a very young age for just sudden random cancer that he developed. I thought he's not working hard enough. He's published 12 papers in 6 years. I'll publish 6 in a year. One day I'll win the Nobel Prize. Obviously I know it's not happening. I still have only 8 publications after 12 years of my career. So you have to recalibrate expectations as you grow older, and that is completely fine. But you do get some brownie points along the way. So although a lot of my research focuses on fintech, I have a paper on climate finance, and it's a theme that has evolved into a completely different research agenda right now. One of the top journals, RFS, they got a proposal from a group of hedge funds and mutual funds that collectively manage over 13 trillion euros in assets. And the idea is that climate is changing, which is not surprising by the way. If climate was not changing, humans would not exist. The earth got warmer, and that is why we exist. But the rate of change of climate is accelerating, and that it poses some risk on the economy or financial markets, etc. The primary role of financial markets is to allocate capital efficiently. Now when we think about allocating capital, finance is really simple. There are only 2 fundamentals that we care about. One is profits or cash flow. The second is risk. You want to maximize profits per unit of risk, and the role of financial market is to take capital away from less efficient firms, which means profits or cash flow per unit of risk is lower, to more efficient firms where the profit per unit of risk is higher. And when it comes to climate risk, the challenge is none of us really understand what aspect of climate risk matters. Do we have a comprehensive measure of climate risk? No. Neither industry, nor academics, nor policymakers have it. So markets tend to be efficient. For those of you who know, efficiency simply means that the stock prices reflect the fundamentals. And the fundamentals, as I said, is cash flow, risk, and cash flow today and cash flow in future as well. So if you don't understand risk and the implications of climate risk on cash flows, markets may not be efficient to begin with. Now, for markets to be efficient, not everybody has to become smart and everybody has to make efficient trading decisions. A Warren Buffett, a Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, a BlackRock, few large investors are sufficient to take stock prices to the efficient frontier to make it efficient. So the question that we were trying to ask here is, when it comes to climate risk, are these so-called sophisticated investors, are they pricing this risk correctly, or do they make mistakes? If they make mistakes, then when it comes to pricing or efficient allocation of capital across different kinds of climate risk, it's not going to be efficient in the first place. So we need to think about better methods. And so the only reason this paper is here is about 230 proposals were accepted, submitted, about 9 was accepted, only 1 from India, 2 from Asia. This is a work with my colleague who joined ISB on the same day. He works for asset pricing, I work on corporate finance. Our fields they do interact, but don't talk a lot with each other. But somehow, because we were the only 2 people who joined together, ISB is also still a very young school, very much like I am Amritsar. We figured out a way to work on something that interests us both. And 2 of the 9 proposals that were accepted were by Nobel laureates. One is Robert Engel at New York University, the other is Lars Hansen at University of Chicago. Both of whom have at least visited ISB once and interacted with the faculty there. So while I'm not winning Nobel, at least I get to see my name listed with the Nobel laureates. In this paper, we found out that when natural disasters happen, like cyclones for instance, mutual fund managers tend to overreact. When they overreact, they sell the stocks exposed to this disaster, so there is temporary mispricing that happens. So if anything, the reaction of fund managers makes stock prices less efficient. The mispricing corrects within a span of 3 3 months. Then few years ago, I got more bragging rights. One of my PhD advisors, Phil Dibwick, got the Nobel Prize for his work on bank runs in 2022. So again, while I am not winning it, at least my academic father did. So coming back to the art of building a research pipeline, Ria very carefully thought of the title. If you notice, she says it's the art of building a pipeline, not science. And there is some messaging there. If it was science, it would be taught to you in PhD programs. Everybody would have a formula, you would have some inputs, you will get an output, you will build a research pipeline. Science is something that we all are very comfortable with, given the nature of our field. It's about identification, the theory, the methodologies that you learn. The art part is very difficult to teach. It's a hunch. It's an intuition. In the Asian knowledge systems, there was a role for intuition. Even in Western knowledge system, there's a role for intuition, but we have not formalized it. We now focus primarily on deductive reasoning, not on intuitive reasoning. That intuition part is, what is the question worth chasing? Which is the puzzle that you find interesting? It doesn't have to solve the world's problem. It has to be exciting enough for you. So you find something uncomfortable, you find something puzzling, and you want to answer that question. And then you need to have a little bit of judgment on whether the broader field will appreciate this question or not. You can never have that perfect judgment. So Phil Dibwick said most of his work is, by the way, on asset pricing. There is this famous Black-Scholes formula that a lot of finance students and professors would have known about. In the original Black-Scholes formula, there is this constraint that was not there, which is no arbitrage constraint. So if you have infinite amount of capital, arbitrage can always exist. So he was the one who said that your proof is wrong because you need to impose this constraint. He has a lot of work on asset pricing, but he got his Nobel Prize not for his work on asset pricing. He got the Nobel Prize for something that he put together with another professor at Chicago, Doug Diamond, while they were giving a policy speech. So just like we have panels here, they had to give a panel discussion on bank runs and bank risk. And they sat on a coffee shop, they wrote down a small toy model on a tissue paper. That became the Diamond-Dibwick model, and the entire financial intermediation literature was built on the basis of that small toy model. The point was that when I was graduating, he told me one thing, that if I knew that this paper will make me famous, I would not have spent my life doing the other 15-20 papers that I worked on. You can never predict what will make you famous or what will really create an impact. And he said that do whatever you like. You have to spend 40 years in this field. A lot of people will give you advice on focus on this topic, focus on this narrow domain. Do whatever you like. It worked out very well for him, because I think he's a genius. It doesn't work out very well for everyone as I later realized. But I did follow his advice. So my research started with, as you will see, a disparate set of papers, but the themes get built up over time. So just to review, why art? The science part is easy, tools, identification, rigor. The art part is intuition, an undefined feeling, a hunch that you have about answering a question, what you like, what is puzzling, etc. And then, in my view, the most important part is serendipity. You have to keep working. As you work, even on small problems, it will beget new questions, it will beget new research. So serendipity happens not when you are thinking about the Nobel Prize idea. When you are working on something, when you actively work, serendipity will happen as a byproduct, not something that you can plan for. And just like entrepreneurship, research acceptance rates of these journals are very, very low, 5 to 6%. Success rates in entrepreneurship is also very same. Out of 100 entrepreneurs, 5 fail. But the entrepreneurs who succeed are the ones who took some risk. 100 take risk, only 5 will succeed. That is true for academia as well. So you can't wait for the perfect idea, the perfect topic. Start with something you find exciting, things will fall in place. Also, please feel free to interrupt me at any point during the talk. I generally talk a lot because my title is professor, so I profess. And I will have more slides that I can cover, so I will tend to rush to the end. Please feel free to stop me. If you have any queries, I'm happy to take them. Now, what is a research pipeline? It is a system or a portfolio of research questions that you develop over time. It will not always exist when you start your career. So early on, feel free to explore. Okay, you don't have to tie you down, I mean, it is possible that you are very excited about, one particular aspect, financial inclusion or AI, and it's perfectly okay to then have a narrow area. But if you're not very sure, I get excited by all kinds of stuff. The finance professors are boring, marketing and strategy professors are cool, so I go and sit in marketing and strategy talks as well. You don't have to be like me, but don't be afraid to explore. Don't think that other student, other faculty has their area figured out. I don't. The area will develop over time. So at least the first few years of a career, explore. The more you explore something, there is a chance that you will find something that you like. And in the early, so this is not for the very early stage because you will not have a portfolio very early on. But after 3-4 years of academic career as a faculty, you need to think of your portfolio of research as a portfolio of investments. So you have safe investments which will publish, maybe do well. You have medium risk investments. And then what I like the most is, if you are in research, what is the point of doing safe things, right? If I want to become an entrepreneur, I need to take risk. It's not just by the way research or entrepreneurship. The one key takeaway from finance is, higher risk means higher return. Obviously, higher risk means you also have a higher downside. Whether you are an individual, a corporate, or a country, if you don't take risk, you will never get high rewards. If you don't take risk, you will have a flat line. A dead person also has a flat line. But is that something that you want for your life? Some people may be comfortable not taking risk. For a lot of people, if you really want to grow, you will have to be uncomfortable. So, my tenure process was very stressful for me, not for the world, obviously. But it also, as I got out of that stress, I also learned implicitly that this tough time comes because they help you grow as a person. So when you find a tough and challenging research problem, you will not have it figured out at the end. Most of my most ambitious papers, I didn't have the technique or tools to answer them when I started. But if you take on a challenge, you learn something new, you evolve as a person, you evolve as a researcher as well. What is not a pipeline? It's not a straight line. It's going to be completely non-linear. So you have a field, you have a topic, and you have a paper. You write a bunch of papers, and a pipeline gets built. It doesn't really work like that. And obviously, in research, all of us know there is no guarantee of success. Rejections are going to be built in, and you don't need to know your area on day one. I grew up in Bihar, so I was very interested in politics. Okay, a lot of Biharis are. Now that did shape my initial thesis. It was on the political economy of corporate investments in India. It's a field that I really enjoy even now. I diversified away from that field because I found other things that excited me a little bit more. And I know a lot of top researchers. One of my co-authors is Amritsar. He's obviously a politics researcher at Stanford. His early work was on family businesses in India. But now most of his career focuses on financial intermediation. So you can start your career in one field and you can then grow into something else that will define what your research entity is. The goal is, you have ideas. If you are in academia, you should be naturally curious. If you are not, then maybe academia is not the right place for you. The ideas will be very, very big. How will AI transform the world? That is a question that is not feasible for any of us to individually answer. You start with a big idea that is puzzling. You focus on something narrow where you have a competitive advantage, which is also feasible to execute. For instance, we had this talk on what are the constraints to AI adoption in MSMEs in GNP, a narrow, well-defined question in the competition early on. And so you iterate on the question. You don't have everything figured out early on. You do some crude tests, whatever you can do with whatever field you are in, the tools are going to vary. Those tests, you keep on refining, eventually it will lead to papers. As you work on papers, and this is a mistake that I made and a lot of researchers make, new questions pop up in your mind. And we somehow explain those questions away. That I have an intuition, maybe this is the reason. So me and Ria were talking right now, that for some reason border areas in India, they are not as well developed as areas further away from the border. Now this is a natural research question. So one could resolve it in our mind that maybe it's because there is a risk of war and that is why these areas don't grow. But we don't know if that is the right answer. Maybe there are other reasons why these areas don't grow. Maybe there are other areas which have grown, and we can figure out how can you reduce the risk or uncertainty of border areas. So whenever these questions pop up when you are working on a paper, note it down. some of them will become a thread that will create a pipeline in the long run. As I was working through the paper, it was all chaotic. In hindsight, as you will see, I will try to connect my various themes and various literatures and papers that I have worked on, and it's really about those unanswered questions that pop up. You note it down somewhere, try to answer it. Don't just move from one topic to other. Yes, you need to explore, but if you have figured out a few set of unanswered questions, focus on those questions. Not all of them will be answerable, but some of them may be worth answering. And this is a mistake that a lot of us do. Your referees will often give you ideas. Your referees will be critical, you will not like it. And in those criticisms, sometimes there are research questions that pop up, which many of us tend to ignore. I have made those mistakes, and some of those referees have them written papers and published in top journals because I didn't pursue those threads. So, just to summarize, what is the research pipeline? It is not a list of papers to write. It is a portfolio of ideas that will define who you are as a researcher is, and this portfolio will not be there on day one. It will connect over time. Steve Jobs made this very nice fancy statement that in hindsight the dots connect. When you're looking into the future, the dots seems unconnected. So one myth we all have is, and many of us do face this imposter syndrome, that the top researchers had it all figured out. Nobody really has it figured out. You become top researchers, a little bit of effort, a little bit of serendipity as well, as it happened with Phil Dibble. So you don't need to identify your research before you start. You don't need to wait until the perfect topic emerges. There is no 5-year plan that works. If 5-year plan worked, India would be a developed economy by now. You don't need to avoid anything outside your core area. The boundaries between fields are getting blurred today. So there is a lot of work happening, let's say, at the intersection of marketing and finance. A significant for me, not for the broader academic community, part of my research focuses on household finance. How do households make behavior? Most of the policy making in India today also is very much based on the research that is done on the US. Now the US consumer, intuitively I know, is very different from an Indian consumer. For a while, I had this intuition, I never thought about making this a research project. Then the question is, if the US consumer is different, on what dimension? US consumer tends to maximize consumption, Indian consumers tend to maximize savings. Now if I change the utility function of individuals from somebody who maximizes consumption to somebody who maximizes saving, it will have very different implications for the macroeconomy, for how people spend, how people save, etc. This is just an intuition, I have not yet figured it out. But a large part of my work today deals with household financial decision making in India. And that requires me a lot to interact with marketing people, because they have been thinking about consumer behavior for a long time, or even psychologists. So they have been thinking about behavior for a long time. In financial economics, we always assume everybody is rational. We know that is not true. We know our friends, we know our family, people are not rational. Now, research is primarily about exploration. You will chance upon something while you are doing. Thinking is obviously a very important aspect of a job. But if you are only thinking, the chances that you will find something interesting, a nice paper to write, is close to zero. So you need to start with whatever fuzzy idea you have. Eventually the idea matures as you present, as you take feedback, as you refine. Most of my, at least half of my research projects have matured because I interact with other academics. They had some questions, I got that feedback, it raised puzzles in my mind, and then I try to answer those questions. Over time, the papers shape into whatever they are. Early on, you have a fuzzy idea, you don't have all the answers figured out. This I already mentioned, questions begets questions. As you work on a research project, you will have new ideas, new questions. Don't leave them unanswered, park it somewhere. You can come back to it later. Themes, as I talk through my work, you will see evolve over time. Early on, you may think that your research area is very disparate. You have one paper about me on labor economics, you have one paper on fintech, one paper on mutual funds. But the ideas tend to have a way of organically connecting over time, and there will be unexpected connections. So by something I learned for household financial behavior helped me answer a questions about global mutual funds and how they invest. So the tools and ideas connect across very different areas. Any questions? Anyone's? I'm sorry, all of you look serious. By nature, I'm in finance. I'm a boring person. If I was like Professor Sanket or Professor Ajita, I would be cooler and funnier. But unfortunately, it is what it is. Any questions, anyone?
So you said that we get feedbacks and then we improve. But what if we don't get feedbacks at all? From where should we look for feedback?
So see, obviously there are papers, and because we are in India, unfortunately most of our journals are right now based in the West. So referees are there, we don't have that visibility. At ISB, luckily, I have more resources than I am, so there are constraints that we all are dealing with, okay? Your constraints are slightly tighter if you are not in an institute. For IM, your constraints are somewhat eased. If you are not in IMs, your constraints are significantly higher. So you will have to do whatever. Life is not fair. Another learning I have had as I have grown older. You have to do best with whatever constraints you have. So you talk to your colleagues, or you think through, you read the literature yourself. Most of my early 3-4 papers was just me trying to improve by working on the literature. I obviously now realize that if I take feedback from different people, that elevates the research question to a different level. No matter how much I work hard myself, it's not the same. But until you have that visibility, that is what you need to do. Now luckily for some of you, now you have Gen AI. I did not have Gen AI when I was starting my career. I don't think it's a tool to outsource your thinking. The ideas and questions have to come for you, because that is the only differentiator that we have in the world of AI. The question that we can ask. The execution part has become easier. It's a very good tool for brainstorming. I brainstorm with Gen AI a lot. Even at ISB, I don't have too many people to talk to. When I started my career, there was one Nitin, but his work was mostly about alpha and asset markets. My work was very econish. People used to say, why are you in finance? Your work is very econish. Now I have slightly more people. I also have a network that I will talk to once in a while. But my friends who stayed in the US, they are going to a conference every month. So the network that they have, the visibility that they get, the feedback that they get is obviously going to be much higher. Gen AI bridges that gap to some extent, not completely. So we have to do best within the constraints that we operate in. Try to go to conferences, as many conferences as possible, but also be a little bit selective, because when you are going to a conference, you are taking time away from the research that you will be doing. So I would preferably go to a conference which have this idea of a discussant. So every time I present a paper, there is a discussant whose only role is to criticize the paper. Those things help. Not every discussant will be good, but out of 5, 2 may be good. Even the bad discussants may give you some research ideas for future questions. That is the only way to do it. Go to conferences. If you were a famous scholar in the US, then you can go to seminars, which most of us can't. So you do the best with what you have. Any other questions, anyone? Are you still with me? It would be good if you could smile a little bit. So this is my pet peeve about early stage researchers, particularly from Asia, especially from India. Don't just go after a topic which is topical. AI may be topical and you may like it, and if you like it, sure, go ahead and work on it. Not because everybody else likes it. The second thing people will do is, government changed something, let's look at its impact. Or I got this data, let's try to use this data to answer a question. I was always taught, and I still retain that thought process, your question should start with some natural curiosity. There is a puzzle that naturally pops out when you are observing the context around you, when you are reading a research article, or when you are reading newspaper, and that curiosity is not settled. You have some sort of discomfort that I want to understand this question. So this question will not change the world, but you actually at least want to understand that question. So always start with some puzzling pattern, something that naturally makes you curious, and then figure out what is the right data and the right strategy to go ahead and pursue that question. Those research in the long run, in the short run you may feel uncomfortable because this path is risky. But in the long run, those are the papers that you will feel more satisfied about, and that will also change you as a researcher. It will give you a different perspective. So always start with some natural curiosity and some puzzle. Your advantage is often your context. You know more about India than anybody else in the world. It's a growing economy, so suddenly the interest in India has gone up. We have this very nice conference at ISB every year, and I would like to invite all of you, by the way. This is called NBR ISB. We have been having it for 4 years. And we have a bunch of top scholars like Raghuram Rajan, Viralacharya, who visit every year. And the only reason they are coming is that they really want to impact and shape future academics. So we would like to have more junior faculty, PhD students come and attend this. Now obviously there are space constraints, so not everybody can be in the same classroom, but we'll try to make arrangements that at least you can see them live and I can interact with them. But so they are all interested in India now. A lot of top, this time not just Indians, a lot of non-Indian scholars came because it's a growing economy. People want to figure out what is happening here, and they may want to work with you, by the way. So don't be afraid to develop a course or network with somebody sitting in Europe or the US. You have a natural advantage. You have institutions, you have access to data, or you have local contextual knowledge that you can bring to the table beyond your theory and empirics, which is obviously important. Any Shah Rukh Khan or Amitabh Bachchan fans here? I don't know if you remember this movie called Mohabbat. I don't.
Is there a question?
Yeah.
I don't have.
Yeah.
No, this should get too fast.
I said
I just
speak
want to
very
question.
fast.
National curiosity, all of us have some confidence
Yeah.
to come with ideas.
Yeah.
Is there a stage where you have put on, let's say, 2-3 years in your paper, and there's also some personality because I spent so
Yes.
much time.
Yes.
Did you abandon your paper
Yes.
and not read to JF,
Yes, I did.
or you?
I did. I'll talk about that.
Okay.
I'll talk at least partly about my failures, okay? And papers that I have abandoned for a variety of reasons. One reason is that some other paper comes out, which is very similar to mine, but it's okay. Somebody comes to Columbia, they get published faster, so I have to abandon it. So I'll talk a little bit about my failures. As I said, I did not have a long, grand vision and plan. So a lot of the learning is through failures only. But given that we are researchers, it's like entrepreneurship, failures are more common than successes. So my advisor told me when I was graduating that to make tenure at ISB, you need 5 good days in your life. In 10 years, all you need is 5 good days. Most days will be bad news. Rejection. 5 acceptances will get you tenure at ISB. So yes, failure is very much a part of it, and there is a lot of sunk cost. As you will see, there are papers I have been working on for 8 years. They are still not published, but I have not given. I keep on improving. Some of them do get, hopefully, will get into journals at some point in time. Anybody remember this movie? Mohabbat. So by the way, I met my wife in 8th class, so not something I should tell students. My mother was very unhappy at that point in time. And then this movie came out, and so she was very angry that why are these people making these movies of school kids going ahead and dating whatever their peers. So he talks about something called Parampara, Pratishtha and Anushasan. Now if you have to think about a researcher's career, can you come up with 3 things or 3 factors that are going to be really important to shape your research career? What does the researcher need? It's going to be very similar to what does an entrepreneur need. What does the researcher really need? One is patience, what I call persistence. You have to be really patient. It's a long time game. It's R&D, right? By design, R&D is supposed to be a long-term game. Somebody said something here. Curiosity, that is one. Rigor is obvious, right? I'm assuming that all of us care about the rigor. But rigor is obviously important. So curiosity, rigor, persistence. Anything else?
Think differently.
Think differently for sure. Anything else? Accountability again. Yes.
And ethical behavior.
Yeah. So I'll categorize it into rigor. But that I think is broadly true for life. Okay. We need to be accountable in whatever job we do. You also should ideally be ethical. As you grow up, you will figure out that the world is not really that ethical. People, jiski lathi uski bhais works. We have Trump. He's making it very explicit across the world. So obviously, you mentioned this in some form. I think more of diligence, rigor and ethics I will take for granted. Curiosity is natural, right? If you have to do R&D, you have to do something new, you have to be generally curious. Diligence is, people maybe not think about it enough. It's really diligence and persistence that carry you forward in this journey. Some people are natural geniuses, for them this may not apply. They will naturally come up with quick questions. One of my advisors is Anjan Thakur. He has done a lot of work on corporate finance, dividend and debt signaling models. I was discussing an idea with him and he said, it takes me 3 hours to write this model. You should take 3 days. It took me 3 months and I still did not have a model. But I didn't give up. So in research, you really have to be diligent. You will get a lot of rejections. You will have to get up from these rejections and be persistent at trying to answer that questions, refining the narrow question that most people in the world will not care about. Only you do. Even our family members don't really want to talk about our research. They get bored. So curiosity, diligence and persistence will matter far more than intelligence. A lot of people in academia are obviously by design very smart. They have raw intellect. The people who are most successful, except for the genius outliers, are the ones who are naturally curious, but most importantly are diligent and persistent at whatever they are doing. Building a research pipeline is not a 2 or 3 year, you're not really building a product to launch to market, you're building your CV, your research identity. It's a multi-year effort. I have spent 12 years in the profession, I have a long way to go. My identity and pipeline is still getting developed. I'll show you the threads. Some of it is formalized, some of it is still getting formalized. Some papers have been working for 8 years, 5 years. They are now getting into submission today, just over the last 5 years. So just to end this part, the curiosity loop, you observe some puzzle. That is a natural way to ask a research question. That puzzle could come from academics. That puzzle could come from your local context, where you are growing up, where you are working. Some natural puzzles, or it could come from some news article that you read. So read broadly, both academic and non-academic financial press. Then you ask why is this happening? Why are the border areas not as developed as non-border areas in India? Then you propose a mechanism. Now you may have an intuitive mechanism, you take it to the data. As most empirical researchers know, the data always kills your ego. More often than not, the first time you test the idea, you will find results that don't align with whatever mechanism you had in place. So then you need to dig deeper and figure out why not. Then you need to have other controls. Maybe you have not controlled for something. Maybe this is not a controlled experiment, which is true for most big picture macro questions. So you refine that. Then you check feasibility. Not every question you can answer within the constraints that you have. Sometimes the school will not give you money to buy a data set which is very expensive. Sometimes at this stage maybe you don't have time to develop a new toolkit. So you can't learn new tools at every stage of your career. At some point you need to learn new toolkit. So figure out what is feasible for you. And then if you're naturally curious, you should always have a crude and quick test to run. If the crude and quick test gives you something promising, then you set out on a long-term path and try to figure it and refine it and try to do more to develop into a research question. Each result will throw up new questions. You test this mechanism, it doesn't work. So you obviously a natural puzzle pops out. Why is this mechanism not working? So let's say you look at border areas and you find that there are 2 areas which are well developed, bordering Pakistan, 2 areas that are not well developed. Then it can't be really about just risk and uncertainty of war. There must be something else that is driving some areas to develop versus not. And then you try to figure out why. You rinse, repeat, and that cycle creates an organic pipeline on its own. So this is how my early days of research look like. I had some work on labor and firms. Again, that came from my natural context. I cared about labor and firms because in India unemployment is big. Lack of skilled labor is a huge challenge, and then we have large workfare programs as well. Then I had some work on financial inclusion, some work on climate finance, political economy. This climate finance work was really about mutual fund managers. But while I was working on it and I figured out that fund managers make mistakes, I naturally got interested into how people make financial decisions. So I started reading about that literature. For a while I did not do any work on that. But a lot of my current work on household finance and household behavior, financial behavior, really stems from the reading that I did during my climate finance work. And then my job market paper was about politics in India and how it influences corporate investments. I will try to connect all of this. As you will see, each paper led to another, and a thread connects all these seemingly disparate themes as well. Any questions? Anyone? Are you still with me? Any questions? Don't force me to cold call. I have become good at that too. So I will categorize my research journey into 3 themes. This is the one that I'm most excited about right now, stream 3, and most of my work is here. So I'm talking about it at the end because there is a more natural flow there. I'll start with stream 1, which is about the interaction between labor and firms. One way to organize this now, in hindsight, okay, not when I was doing it, is at a very big picture level. If you think about the economy has 2 sides. One is the production side, the firms. They also hire labor. They produce goods that the household and consumption side consume. So you have the consumption side, which supplies labor but also consumes the products being produced by this production side. And then you have some regulation at the top. So they are regulators and policy makers. The regulation affects how labor will be hired, how the production and consumption side will interact, and then you have financial intermediation in the middle. in my view, far more important than government or policymakers themselves. It connects the production and the consumption side. Both sides are liquidity constrained. Both sides have limited capital. If you can ease financial constraint, the business side can invest in business expansion. The consumption side can invest in their education, in their health, in building their productivity, but also consuming. Sometimes they can be over leveraged, and there are flip side to that as well. So let me start with this, and this really came about from reading newspaper articles. I joined ISB in 2013. My work was primarily on managerial compensation, incentive structure, and corporate governance. My political economy work is also from the perspective of corporate governance. If politicians interfere in the day-to-day running of SOEs of state-owned enterprises, it is going to have some negative distortion, some negative impact. But I diversified away from that area for a variety of reasons. So this was a time when this was being debated in Parliament. Is NREGA good? Is NREGA bad? I don't think we can comprehensively answer that question. But I try to focus on the narrow aspect of that question. In the US, we have something called unemployment insurance. So if you are unemployed, you will get some compensation for the government. So I started thinking about how do I define NREGA. It's really a workfare program. It is not completely an unemployment insurance, but it is some sort of insurance. Unemployment insurance is even if you don't work, you will get some payment. Here you will have to work. Unemployment insurance you get throughout the year. Here it's only for 300 days in a year. But how will it affect the production and the consumption side of the economy? Now the consumption side is the labor supply dynamics. Yesterday Professor Sugata was talking about, we went to this place called Sadapind, and there were two ladies feeding us very nice sarson ka saag and makki ki roti. So he had a conversation with those ladies. They work from 9 to 10 and their house is 1 hour away. So they reach the place at 9, they leave at 8, they go back their home at 11. They get 9,000 rupees on a monthly basis. Now they obviously have, in theory, they have the option to go to Delhi, Hyderabad, Mumbai and make a lot more money, but they have constraints. So there are benefits of staying close to the home, more so unfortunately for females than males, especially in the poorer parts of the country. And so the point is that when you have an outside option closer to the home, at the margin, some labor supply decision will be tilted. Some labor may prefer working at home rather than going out of state. And so what does that do? That tightens the labor supply market. So for firms particularly in Punjab, Ludhiana, Amritsar, Jalandhar, labor supply got tightened post NREGA. If labor supply gets tightened, there are two options, right? Your cost of production has gone up. If the cost of production goes up significantly, that you no longer remain competitive in this industry, you will have to shut down. Or you try to innovate. Innovate doesn't really mean that you come up with Gen AI, but you maybe move towards automation. You try to replace parts of the job done by physical labor with automation, and so you replace labor with capital, and that is what we find. For some parts of the economy, for some manufacturing firms, the labor market got tightened. There was a shortage in supply of labor, which is still true in India. There is a lot of labor, there is a lot of unemployment, but there is lack of skilled labor for certain kinds of jobs. How do firms respond? By replacing labor with capital. What are the long run consequences? I don't know. But one consequence can be, if firms start relying more on automation, then what will the labor do? And if the whole purpose of NREGA was to create some sort of a cushion for this unskilled labor, now you are making them dependent on this workfare. Why? Because you have forced the firm unintentionally to move away from labor towards capital. So even in the long run, now they don't have a chance of getting a job. So that is why I like to argue that in India we tend to think too much of the government and we tend to rely too much on government agency and government policies. We have thousands of policies. If policies could fix our country, it would have been fixed long time back. So we really need people like you, people like young people across India, both in academia, national security, policy making, etc., to rely less on the government, but to create structure of incentives and systems that work. Private entrepreneurship works better than government entrepreneurship, even when private entrepreneurship is selfish and profit seeking. Think about MTNL or BSNL. What is one job that MTNL and BSNL had? As a PSU, what is one core objective that they should have? Ensuring telecom connectivity. But is it just connectivity or something beyond that? Is it just connectivity or something beyond that? Connectivity at what price?
Social benefit.
low cost connectivity for every nook and corner of the country. They are PSU, they should maximize social welfare. Who really brought the cost of internet down and took internet to every nook and corner of the country? Jio, a private selfish-seeking company. Now we had Hindustan Motors, again a PSU. What should be their one job? To make a cheap and efficient car for most of the Indians. Now Tata Nano failed. Okay, it's an experiment failed. But it took a private company to think about creating a low-cost vehicle for the masses. So I mean, governments have nice plans and nice visions, but markets are generally better. They are not the best. There are problems with free markets and capitalism, but they are often better than governments at solving many of these problems. Now, while I was working on this paper, this was from the employment side. What happens when you create outside options for employees? What happens when you do employee-friendly regulations? So the natural question was, what about the other side? What about if you create regulations that favor capital markets? So you can have human capital markets, you can have financial capital markets, and capital markets really have two components. You have equity and you have debt. So there was this law of Sarfezi passed in India. Sarfezi is really about strengthening capital rights. If you are a bank, you can seize and liquidate collateral easily. And so the natural question was, what happens when you strengthen capital rights? And we find the exact opposite effect. When you strengthen creditor rights, firms became, especially low profitability firms, became worried that if I have too much capital, the bank can come in and seize my assets, seize my machinery, seize my land, seize my property. So what should I do? Maybe I should move away from capital toward labor, because luckily we don't live in a world with slavery. So banks cannot seize labor, banks can seize capital. And as a result of Sarfezi, firms became hesitant. So the goal was very noble, right? If you give creditor more rights, their expected recovery in the case of bank loan default will be higher. If the expected recovery is higher, the cost of supplying credit will go down. If the cost goes down, more people can borrow, more firms can invest. But there was a counterintuitive effect that firms became worried about excessive liquidation, because Sarfezi kind of passed the judiciary. We needed some efficiency, but maybe IBC is that what we needed, not Sarfezi early on. As a result, at least some firms but reduce the lending, collateralized lending, and they move away from capital to labor. So out of these two papers, what do I learn? That nothing happened in India. Sarfezi moved labor, firms away from capital towards labor, then Narega came in, moved firms away from labor to capital, net there is zero effect. That is a joke, by the way. Now, any of these laws, by the way, so again, in my view, don't be blinded by ideology. As a researcher, be open to answering questions and let the data speak, let the data take you wherever it does. So while working on Narega, I was interacting with Professor Krishnamurthy Subramaniam, who has a lot of work on innovation in the US. And so we started talking about how employee rights might affect innovation. And then we looked at the law literature. We didn't find much work. There were all kinds of work for innovation. There was work on how does analyst following. Analysts are these financial analysts that give you buy and sell recommendations, affects innovation. How do banks affect innovation? And we thought a fundamental question is, how do you decide who gets to own the innovation? Whether the employer or the employee? That should be a first order question to answer, but nobody had looked at the question. Luckily, 7 US states has passed laws that made it easier or made it more difficult for the firms to expropriate innovation done by employees. So in the US, it's kind of very blurry. If you are working, let's say, for Google, and you come up with some innovation on the site, Google can claim right over that innovation by arguing that you use company resources or you learned something in the company training program that led to this innovation, and they can expropriate these rights. What the 7 US states did is made it very difficult for employers to expropriate rights of employees. Now, the natural question is, what is the net impact on innovation? It could go either way. One, now employers are worried that if I invest more in this human capital, in training them better, they can come up with innovation that can compete with me. So their investment may go down. But as an employee, there may be a positive effect. Now my incentive to learn about new technologies is higher because I can create innovation on the site that can create more value. As I create innovation on the site, I also learn something. Like when we do research, we bring some of that research to our classes. As I am doing innovation on the site, I will have some learnings that will also make me more productive in my job at Google. So the net effect, we don't know. The stage at which US was in, the net effect turned out to be positive. So you improve the rights of employees over innovation. The rights of firms went down. Despite the rights of firm going down, the net effect on innovation was positive. And firms also learn from this, right? So you have Google Labs, which basically allows employees free time to pursue innovation. Gmail, Google AdSense, a lot of things that create revenue for Google came out from that. Sony was one of the early ones to do this. They would give employees one Friday off every 2 weeks to tinker with innovation. Not every employee, the R&D employees. Sony PlayStation came out as a result of that. Or the 3M tapes that you see, again very similar. Some 3M allowed employees to tinker with innovation, and that led to more innovation. So firms also learn from this. They understand that if employees have more rights, they can innovate better. Some of them will be taken away, but some of it will create value for me. So they start investing more in innovation as well. So now when I started it, none of these was supposed to be a theme. I started with something on Narega that led to this question about Sarfazi and capital rights. And then on a coffee conversation with Professor Subbu, we figured out, let's look at employee rights and innovation. So that kind of created one theme of work on how labor and firms interact within the bounds of regulation, how regulation affects this interaction. Any questions? Anyone? Yes.
So yeah, looking at your portfolio, so I think we might have to resolve curiosity with perseverance.
Yes.
Right? So if you keep staying curious,
It's not enough.
lot of ideas.
Yes.
Right? And then you can't persevere on one idea which is kind of going.
Yes.
So how do you balance that? Right?
That part is, as I said, this is an art. It's tough. I don't think I balanced it very well. In hindsight, I could have done a lot of things better. I spent too much time on some projects that maybe I shouldn't have. But at that point, you don't know, right? There is an optimal. The optimal will be different for different people. You can't pursue all ideas that you like. So for very junior scholars, it's going to be tough to answer that question. For slightly more seasoned scholars, assistant, young assistant professors, I have a slide on that. How do I think about optimizing on these projects, and how many projects on an average I have going on? And I don't like to work on too many things. So I am slower than the average researcher or the typical median successful researcher in a, let's say, a US business school in finance. So there is a trade-off. It's not easy to resolve the trade-off. I can't give you a cookie-cutter answer. You will have to figure out which question either you are more excited about, or you at that point think will create the most value and most impact, which experts may not do.
Yeah, I think most of us here, we may agree to this, that the new idea always seems more engaging. Right? So if you spend some time on the older idea, so the tendency is always to go after curiosity than perseverance.
I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah.
So I will come to that. Towards the end, I have a slide exactly on that. How do you prioritize? I got some advice. I will give you the same advice, and I try to stick to it. Some of these, we are academics. We also know that people are irrational. We have our own biases. Now, unlike incentives, which can be used to incentive payments, which can be used to solve problems about effort, accountability, moral hazard, for biases, the incentives will not work, right? Because I don't know that I am biased. Now, because we are academics and we know a little bit about our own biases, the only way to resolve it is that if we are cognizant and we come up with some rules that we stick to. So one short answer is, if you have a paper that is close to submission, that obviously gets priorities over early stage ideas. Although the early stage idea will naturally be more exciting, some curiosity unresolved, the paper close to submission has some curiosity resolved. So then I try to follow this very religiously. It may not be, I may not feel happy while doing it, but I always prioritize papers that are closer to submission versus newer ideas. If you have papers in R&R, that goes without saying, right? That gets the first priority. So even if you have a very promising idea that you are working on, which you think in the future will make you a big person in research, I will still prioritize the R&R, because having something on the CV is better than not having anything. The second is papers closer to submission, and third is a portfolio of newer ideas, which not all of it you can pursue. Let's say you have 10. You pick 2 based on what you can. Some people can multitask a lot, and then the remaining you park. The risk is that some of the things that you park will be answered by somebody else, but not all of it will be. And you have a very unique way of thinking, which we don't realize. All of us as academics tend to underestimate ourselves, unlike much of the public intellectual space. They are so confident about whatever they say. You will always bring a new perspective to a question. Like in this case of Sarfazi, there are hundreds of papers on cater rights. It's not really that big and that novel an idea. But despite that, nobody had looked at a labor capital substitution angle. And the reason we chanced upon it is because we were working on Narega anyway. So that idea came from there. So park it, that is the best I can say. And when you have time, you get back to it. Time management is very, very difficult. I am not great at it. Managing your research portfolio is also a little bit of art and hunch. You get slightly better at it with time. You get more maturity on where to prioritize and where to focus. But early on, I think it's very difficult to learn that. Any other questions? Anyone? So very quickly, any other questions? Anyone? Sorry. Again, people are quiet and bored. I'm sorry. It is what it is. You invited me. I did not want to.
I think it would be appreciated that if you talking to each other and which on the lighters, because we have generative AI and what we do is production and now generative AI and
Yeah.
so I really admire that, and my first question to you would be, how do we go back from generative AI to normal conversations to get into the idea? Like I would completely be relying on technology for giving me answers and letting me know what is
Right.
first thing.
Yeah.
So I convince myself to go back to the old route, which I know is more profitable. I know is more what at least probably that the generation is exactly. First thing is this, and the second is you talk about a lot of your research is based on real data.
Yeah.
How do we access that data? I spend a lot of time trying to get to that data. How do you prioritize on that?
Right. So, right now at ISB we have a lot more resources than what I had when I started. So I looked for data set that was publicly available or cheap. So this Narega and Sarkezi work come from ASI, which was publicly available to all researchers. Now, if your institute has a little bit of research talent and they are willing to spend, then you need to go and convince the dean or whoever handles that resource that I need this research for this project. Can you fund it? If you go alone, they will not likely fund it. But if you can get 3-4 other people who also want to pursue or use that data, then they may get funded. But obviously there are no easy paths. No, like I want to build an open AI. What do I do? Where do I get the capital from? I can't. But whatever you can do. So there are a lot of public data available right now on India. There are a lot of economists who work on India primarily because India produces a lot of data sets.
The data that India produces, the creditworthiness of that is also been questioned in the past.
Yes, yes.
So how do we tackle that?
You do your best. The ability of people to question this is going down over time. It is there is now a lot of research even in finance. Okay, finance. If you count the number of papers published in the top 3 journals in the last 10 years, on India, not from India. From India it's fewer. There are 12 papers, but there were 0 prior to that. That number is gradually increasing. The trust in Indian data is increasing. The challenge is, there are concerns about the ethical standards of Indian researchers. Some of it is bias, some of it is also truth. If a journal editor sees 15 papers coming in a month from a same researcher, then they are naturally going to question, are they diligent enough? And that, we don't realize it. That creates a negative externality on all other scholars that work on India. So if one finance scholar gets tainted, it also taints all of us. That has happened with China. With India, the problem is not as severe as China. The more we work, the better it will get. There is no reason to believe that US research is absolute. The data may be very good, but it's not applicable to India. It's not applicable to China. It's not applicable to the rest of the world. So one can always question. We are not able to question why? Because the journals are based in the US. If they were based in India and China, then the opposite may have been true. So it's a long way. We have to do a small part. I don't think we will solve all problems today. Just like I am Amritsar, the country is still being built. There's a long way to go. But just like I am Amritsar, I also feel that there's a lot of promise. When the campus is developed, I think it will look very pretty. So it's incumbent upon our generation to build that platform, and then the next generation has to carry it forward. It's not a one-year thing. Research is a 10, 15-year, multi-year plan. Building a country is a 100, 200-year plan. It will not happen overnight. But I think the research ecosystem has improved significantly. And it's not just me. Most researchers, academics who come to India, they feel that vibrancy. They feel that the questions that people are asking is better. The data that they are using is better. The research tools and rigor has gotten better. It has a long way to go. But we are at least catching up with Europe. With US and China, there is still some gap, but with Europe, we are catching up quite quickly. Most IIMs, I think, would be comparable to most good schools in Europe, which was not true even 15 years ago. So it's at least the trend is positive. Any other questions? So very quickly, lessons from stream 1. When you are working on project Y, don't just end there. It will lead you to complementary questions. When you answer complementary questions, then you build a portfolio, you build a pipeline. If you just ignore all those complementary questions, then you may end up with a disparate set of papers that don't really talk to each other. But if you are building on that unanswered question, then over time you build a pipeline. It doesn't happen in 5-6 years. For some very smart people or lucky people it will happen. For most people it will take 10-12 years for that theme to emerge. Domain expertise compounds. My paper from Narega led me to capital rights, that led me to innovation. I read across literature and that gave me a perspective. And right now I told you I work on fintech and financial inclusion. But because I worked on innovation, I'm trying to come up with a measure of financial innovation itself. That has financial innovation gone up in India? How do you measure it? In the innovation literature you have patents, but financial innovation is not patentable. The loan used to take 7 days to get approved, if it was approved in a physical manner. Now you go to Google Pay, you apply for a loan, 5 minutes loan approval happens. It's a process innovation, but there is no patent. So how do you define it? So that connects my work on innovation and fintech, which there was no natural connection. If I had not worked on innovation, I would not even think about financial innovation in the first place. So again, I didn't plan it. All it happened over time, and I'm not the best researcher out there, but despite that, a connection emerges. The second part, I'll quickly go through. So this question on how does climate risk affect fund managers, this came during the second year of my PhD. So we used to have these research seminars. Every Friday, some researcher would come and present a paper. And then one day before the research seminar, we would meet with the faculty. We would discuss the paper, critique the paper, etc. And then we had to propose a new question on the topic that the researcher is working on. And these were researchers not necessarily working in my area. But despite that, we were forced to come up with a new topic in that area. At that point, there was a paper being presented on analyst biases and analyst incentives. When they recommend buy themselves, what biases and incentives they may have. And I thought of a question that when it comes to climate risk, how do analysts behave? Are they pricing it correctly? Are their buy and sell recommendations consistent with that? And I wanted to pose that question. Then I forgot about it. Then when me and Nitin, the asset pricing professor who is a close friend now, started talking about potential research, I pitched this idea to him that this is really about stock market, would you like to work on it? And then he said, why look at analysts? Just look at fund managers. Because for fund managers, we have real-time, high-frequency measure of performance. Unlike most of our jobs. In fund managers, the one metric is the return that you are generating, the risk that your portfolio has. Return to risk is a nice measure. The data is easily available. And so let's look at that question, and that is how this question came about. While working on this, I got to know about this literature on behavioral finance and how behavior affects decision making, etc. And then, obviously, because I started working on fund, I got to understand the fund literature, the fund data sets, etc. Once I understand it, if I am bored, maybe I leave it. If not, then I will try to use it to ask something else in the future, which will go back to the question that Professor Gohar was asking, right? That what do you do about projects? There are a bunch of projects which you will not see on my CV, which have been killed. This is still there somewhere online, so I'm talking about it. So, like the politics theme got dead. I worked on a paper which is, there is, by the way, something in the air. Because of Trump, the questions on geopolitics and the role of geopolitics in financial markets, real economy is going to increase. So there is a timing for this idea. Now, political economy has been an idea for a long time, right? How does politics shape firms, households, etc. But then I thought that when mergers happen, would Democrat firms merge more with Democrat firms? Would Republican firms merge more with Republican firms? Today it seemed like an obvious question to ask, but nobody had asked this question. Then I worked with a research associate who is now pursuing his PhD at Ohio State. We tested this because the data, at least at ICMM the data is available. It's called SDC Platinum. IIM A and B have it. I don't know if Amritsar has it. We tested it. Within 1 month, we got all the results. It was so clean. Most of the mergers happened between red firms or blue firms. Mergers across Democrat Republican firms tend to have a negative performance. mergers within the firms tend to, on an average, have a more positive performance. We were very excited. We started writing the draft. Exactly at that time, two professors from Boston College had done the same test, written the same draft, and uploaded that paper on SSRM. So now because they uploaded it, like, in India you put a rumal when you go to studies on a table. I can't do much, so I had to kill it. This is a project that we had taken public also. Yet somebody else, much bigger than us, wrote a paper on this with a very similar finding that got published. So this got killed. So while working on climate finance, sustainability was a big thing, still a big thing in the world right now. You have this ESG and non-ESG funds. And so we thought let's look at whether they do something differently. So we did not have a very deep idea. The only question was, are ESG funds very different from non-ESG funds? And because we had the data ready, it was very easy to test it. The tough part was identifying who is ESG versus non-ESG, and for that we looked at fund prospectuses. They themselves claim to be ESG versus non-ESG. It turned out that ESG and non-ESG funds don't really invest very differently. They have almost exactly same portfolio. Both kinds of companies invest in oil, both kinds of companies invest in brown funds that invest in brown companies. The only difference is ESG fund has a higher fee as compared to non-ESG fund, and I thought it was a cool paper. We were struggling because we thought null results are very difficult to sell. If you find a difference, you can make a nice story. If you don't find a difference, you cannot make a nice story. We were inexperienced. At the same time, Shiva Rajgopal from Columbia wrote exactly the same paper that got published in a top accounting journal. So we had to kill this project. So one lesson from a failed project, as we were talking with Gauhar, getting scooped is normal. If nothing else, it should give you confidence that some good researcher in the world also thought about the same question and answered the same question, and that is going to be, just like entrepreneurship, somebody else coming up with the same idea is going to be fairly common. And there is this, there is this hawa of ideas. Same ideas come to different set of people at the same point in time. It looks obvious now, it did not look obvious 10, 15 years ago. This work, we think of it as some cost and wasted. First of all, we could have pursued this project, pushed it somewhere in some journal. It is better to cut your losses. We all have some cost fallacy. We teach about this in class. We need to apply what we teach in class to our own research as well. A bad paper takes actually a lot more effort than a good paper, a high potential paper. Why? Because it will go through more rejections on marginal contribution, on methodology, etc. You will spend in more time that could have been used to write a better paper, a better research question. So kill your projects if they are not working out early. The failure, you will always learn something from the projects. And again, I talked about unanswered questions, unanswered threads. If you pursue that, a new paper may emerge. So which brings me to this paper which has been ongoing for 5 years. This is again with Nitin and another colleague, Apurva, who has left academia and now a chief economist at Muthul Group. He's still very much a scholar. We are still revising this paper. We have been on it for 5 years. The most recent revision just got done 2 weeks ago, and this is the first submission in 5 years. So while working on this, we started thinking about more broadly how firms think about uncertainty. And this was the first Trump presidency. So I was thinking about geopolitical uncertainty. How does geopolitical uncertainty affect capital? How does capital get invested? Will FIIs pull from India if there is retrospective taxation? That was the context. And Nirmala Sitharaman had introduced this portfolio surcharge tax, which is something like that we also end up paying on the capital gains. So on the foreign investors, there was a surcharge tax introduced. In that week, the amount of FII inflows was more than what we saw in the past 10 years put together. So which naturally raises the question that does policy uncertainty affect the amount of capital a country can attract? And then as we talk, we thought, why look at India? Make it a more global study. We will also get more variation. When countries become politically or policy uncertain countries go up, do fund managers retrench their investments from there? We wrote the paper, we thought the idea was exciting enough, but then people were asking why. If they are taking funds away, where are they going? What other options do they have? Do you have a theory in mind? And then we did more tests, it took us a while. Finally, this year we wrote down a theory, last year we wrote down a theory model that helped discipline how we think about this question, and now it is a much better paper. Will it get published? I don't know. I think it should. But it is a much better paper than it was when we started. It took us 5 years and it is still not done. If we are lucky, it will get published, it will take 3 more years. So it requires a long time effort. You can't just write a paper and say that you are done. If you feel unsatisfied with how you have answered the question, you need to be persistent at it. Over time it will get refined, again a multi-year journey. Now, some unexpected correction that happened. The climate risk paper taught me about fund managers and how they invest. The political economy paper, while I was working on it, one referee said that we talk about politics and how it affects PSU firms, but what about political uncertainty and how it affects corporate investment firms? This was just one robustness test we did for the referees. But because we did this, I got to know about the policy uncertainty measure, which is created by Nick Bloom at Stanford, I think. And so I got interested in policy uncertainty in general. And I thought in India, one of the biggest challenges that we have is our policy is very uncertain. We do something one day, the next day we reverse, we tinker with taxes every year. No other same country tinkers with taxes every year. We need to have a long-term plan. And so that is how I got into this idea of policy uncertainty. How did I chance upon the theory model for this paper? While working on fintech and household finance work, I started learning in my PhD for the first 4 years, by the way, I wanted to be a theorist. My advisor said that, theorists don't get a job, don't do it. In the 5th year, I was in panic and I wrote an empirical paper and then I became an empiricist. But now that I got tenure 2 years ago, I thought let me go back to my old passion. So I started tinkering with theory and learning theory again. The challenge is I'm older, my ability to learn maths has gone down, but I also have Gen AI as a tool. So it helps me, which things I don't remember, it helps good at explaining. It's obviously not a substitute for a colleague, but for a lot of tools part it is good. For refining research questions it is not good because it is trained on the past. Because it is trained on the past and research is really about finding something which is not about the past, which is novel. That part it gives you very shallow responses. It's also a sycophant. It will always say, oh, great paper, this will get into Journal of Finance. So you need to discount that part. At least the tool part is easy. So when I worked on household finance, I started modeling this behavior. And that allowed me to think about how to model fund manager behavior as well. And so there is a connection from a learning aspect. So lessons from Scheme 2, embrace long timelines. It takes a lot of while to build the pipeline. If I just stopped at climate disaster project, it would be one paper which was not rented to my overall portfolio. I followed it up with another project which got killed. So if you look at my CV, it seems like I have one standalone paper on climate and sustainability, but I had a portfolio which did not work out. But that led to unexpected connections. And I feel something that I'm really excited about, one of my most ambitious papers till date. How does policy uncertainty affect global fund flows? And then one can follow this up. Because global fund flows get distorted, does it perpetuate inequality across the globe? There are bigger questions to answer as a result. I don't have a lot of time. I will end with the last part. This will seem more naturally connected, but it was also not early on. So I have actually now 6 projects in this space of household finance, financial inclusion and fintech, all connected with each other. This started with JDY. Amit was visiting us in 2014 when JDY was just launched. We were having coffee and again we started talking about, I asked him, can I work with you? And he said yes, but come up with a research question. So I said that we are launching this universal banking program and there are a lot of this World Bank policy papers on how bank access can do all kinds of wonders. Economic activity can improve, people's lives can improve. But there is no evidence to back this claim. Can we look at it? This is the largest financial inclusion program in the world. So that is how we started with JDY. Did it have any impact? The challenge in India is that I can have data on bank accounts. I don't have data on what people do with these bank accounts. So I have transaction data, but what they are consuming, what kind of job they are doing. So we study whatever we can study. It has some impact. People do save a little bit better. So they save during good times and they withdraw during bad times, which is what we call smoothing consumption. That does happen. But this big claim of all these policy papers, that if you give people bank accounts, they will also get access to credit, that did not really happen. The impact of JDY on access to credit was very low. So then we naturally wondered why. Why do people who are getting bank accounts are not able to access credit? They can only save but not take a loan. Then the natural answer to that was information asymmetry. I may have a bank account, but I am a plumber or a panwala. I get my income in cash. Banks don't have visibility in that income, so they cannot verify my income, they cannot assess my credit worthiness. So which got us to the next question. Is it possible to build an alternate credit score model for people who don't have a financial history? How? People may not have a financial transaction history, but they may have smartphones, they are interacting on WhatsApp, Facebook, they have e-commerce apps downloaded on their phone. They also have call logs, right? They have a social network, they call some people, they don't call some people. And this is not a positive paper. The question was, can this digital data help us predict credit risk? Or in other words, is digital data also capturing some aspects of financial behavior? And we work with a fintech firm in India, which is now a pretty big fintech firm in this D2C space. And it turned out that this alternate data works very well in predicting credit score, especially for people without a traditional credit history. The point was that there is potential for digital data to work in assessing credit worthiness when people don't have a credit history. So now you can build a credit score for people, but then not everybody has a smartphone, not everybody has a digital history. How do you scale it up? And then luckily for us, UPI happens. UPI is better than any e-commerce transaction or mobile app download. Here, a Panwala and Chartwala is now directly accepting digital payments. So they are building a financial history. Does it lead to more credit access? So then all the three papers connect with each other. So this is, by the way, 8 years in making. This paper did not get published despite having a very fancy co-author on the paper. I spend 1 month on this paper every year. If nothing else, I get to learn from my co-authors and I'm still connected to them. So I've spent a lot of effort, no real reward in terms of publication, but a lot of reward in learning. And senior researchers also, by the way, value persistence. I think one reason why Amit values me, he has access to the best researcher in the world. His connection with me is because he believes that I am persistent in whatever I do. We just have a much better version now, revised 2 weeks ago. We are getting more data, we will still work on it, and hopefully by next year we will have something better. I will not talk about the big picture questions, a lot of credit constrained people in India. Most of our adults have never taken a formal loan. Whatever formal loan people have taken, most of it has happened in the past 6 years, post the launch of UPI and the rise of fintech. Now, why? Because they did not have a credit history. Can alternate data help? Yes. For this specific fintech, their loan approval rates went up by 17%. So for people who did not have a credit history, they were denying loans. Now there was a 17% jump in approval rate. So they were able to make loans where they couldn't make earlier. Obviously, no research is perfect. There are concerns about machine learning models. It's a black box. We don't know what the underlying parameters are, how the relationships evolve. There can be regime shifts. You move from non-COVID to COVID, suddenly the model may collapse. The point here is, there are unanswered questions about this paper still, which I have not answered. This regime shift I tried to work with a PhD student. We did not get good data, or we did not find something interesting, but I have not given up on it. At some point, I may pick up this thread. The challenge is somebody else may work on it on the while. There are a lot of unanswered questions from this stream. Digital divide, what about people who are digitally excluded? That is where the UPI paper comes in. At least one unanswered question I was able to answer to this. So what do we find, by the way? This is correlation, not causation. If you are interested, read the paper in detail. In the paper, we have a causal claim. At the PIN code level, a 7% increase in UPI transaction is associated with a 10% increase in credit. So after UPI, access to credit is going up, especially for the new to credit segment. It's going up even for people like us, the prime segment. But this is where the marginal value is. Who is leading this access to credit? Fintechs. Both banks and fintechs can access the same UPI data. But fintechs are leading, banks are not, because banks still don't find it profitable to lend to multiple small individuals. Fintechs are digital native, so it's maybe more cost effective for them. This UPI paper, while this was happening, RBI got worried that people may be borrowing too much, fintechs may be charging too much. Then the natural question is, what is too much? We think of 30% credit interest rate as too much. Ultimately, the cost of capital is a function of risk. If the risk of default is higher, you will have to charge a higher rate. Now, it is possible that you may not want to lend to that person at any rate at all. But if you have to lend, you will have to charge a higher rate. If RBI caps interest rate, what is going to happen? If, let's say, Indian government caps the price of Tesla, what is going to happen? Tesla will not launch the vehicle in India. People will not buy Tesla. The same thing happens with credit as well. RBI can cap interest rate. It's not going to help anyone. Why? Because the credit supply will shrink as a result. So this is a paper with a fintech in California, which is trying to answer this question. What is, if people are allowed to choose the price on their own, how much do they pay? And we looked upon this again. This is a firm that gives people credit, but doesn't charge any interest. It allows people to tip. So you can tip whatever you want. Now, all the literature that we know about the price of credit is from the supply side. How much do banks charge? How much do fintechs charge? We don't know the willingness to pay for credit from the demand side. In marketing, there is a lot of work on willingness to pay for different kinds of stuff, but not willingness to pay for financing. And so this was such a nice setting that there is no causality when I'm in this paper. I don't know how this paper will do, but I'm very excited about this because it allows us to give a one number. What is the willingness to pay for credit if people are allowed to pay on their own or choose the price on their own? So in the US there are these payday loans which are kind of infamous. The annual interest rates are 300%. It turns out that even in this model, where people pay on their own, the interest that they end up paying on an annualized basis is close to 300% only. Obviously these are very small loans. You take a loan of $100, you pay a $5 tip, it turns out that on an annualized basis it becomes very, very high. And then what do people do with this credit? I will not talk about this. A follow-up question, when people get access to credit, what do they do? Do they consume? Do they invest in education? Do they invest in health? One small aspect of that we are trying to answer here. So just to complete this theme, started with JDY on bank accounts. We learned about credit impact of bank accounts is limited. Why? Maybe because there is information asymmetry. Then the question is, how do we solve? Can alternate data work? This was a very risky paper to write. When we wrote this, we were the early ones using machine learning in finance. People like to see confidence interval and p-value. So we got rejected because there was no confidence interval and there was no p-values. People were not comfortable with these new tools. Now it has proliferated. That led us to asking, how do we scale this alternate scoring model, the UPI? And then finally, what is the right price of credit? So as I said, connecting the dots started with a lot of disparate work. Eventually, there is some connection. I have worked a theme on firms and labor, the production side. Narega, creditor rights, innovation. The innovation part also fits very well with the consumption and household side. How does labor and employees respond when innovation rights go up? But then there is work on financial inclusion, etc. Intermediation connects both the production and the household side. I have worked on the supply side. How does alternate data lead to more supply of credit? And the demand side, what is people's willingness to pay, how people use credit, etc. And then this is all tied up using regulation. All of us operate within the regulation and the government that the country policy makers and the global policy makers set for us. I think I'm out of time. We started a little bit late, so I'll take 5 more minutes. Unexpected connections I have talked about already. I will not talk about it again. This paper is really coming from very disparate literature. The paper on global uncertainty and fund allocation, climate risk, political economy, behavioral finance. These three streams don't naturally connect with each other, but for my paper, it did. Now, just some takeaways for all of you. Principle for building a pipeline, I already mentioned, stay curious. Killing projects, as Gohar rightly asked, is very, very important. Most of us don't do enough. We need to kill more projects than we end up doing. Ask complementary questions. Try to build a diverse, but diverse doesn't mean that you have short relationships. Just like marriage, a co-authorship is kind of like an academic marriage. You need to first figure out, will you enjoy working with this person? Is this person somebody you can trust? Sometimes you will have co-authors that you will not like, you can't do much, but try to invest in long-term co-authorships. People value that as well, and you also evolve as a team. Every paper with a different set of co-authors doesn't work that well. And most importantly, you have to be patient and persistence. Research theme takes a long time to develop. I used to be criticized by very top scholars from places like NYU that one, you are not focused, you work on different stuff. Second, you are not finance, you are economics. Now finance itself has changed and so now they don't really question this. Some practical advice, read broadly and outside your field. Unexpected ideas will come from reading. So your mind needs to be stimulated. Just by sitting and doing nothing, you can't stimulate a mind. Start with the question. This is something I will keep repeating. Not the data, not the method, not the topic. What is it that you are curious about? Why is this question worth answering? Have coffee conversations wherever you can. Okay, you will not all have the opportunity to have too many coffee conversations. Professor Sunil told me that for the last 6 months he was the only person in the department. But whenever you can in these conferences, as things change, things improve, have those conversations. They will lead to research ideas. Present often. Wherever you get a chance. Often doesn't mean 100 times. Whenever you get a chance, go to conferences, present your work. It also builds your confidence, but it also gives you some feedback. Not just from the discussants, but also in the threads that you have outside the conferences when you have conversation. Keep an ideas list and be okay with rejection. Right? You will get rejected again and again and again. Acceptances are very few. Rejections are 95%. So everybody gets rejected. My work with Amit gets rejected left and right, and he was also the editor of Journal of Finance. So if he can get rejected, we all can. It's totally normal. Be okay with rejection. Research moves very fast. So the tools, writing styles, you need to keep up with the norms. The editors judge you when they see a paper. Unfortunately, it is our job to sell the paper, okay? People have limited bandwidth. When I was young, I used to think that, I did something nice. People should figure out that this is valuable. People don't have the time to figure out. You have to tell them why it is valuable. You have to be sharp about your marginal contribution, what do you add, etc. And you need to know the current journal styling. So for instance, when I started my career, the introduction could be 7-8 pages long. Today, if it is more than 5.5 pages, the editor will think he doesn't know what research is or what the current norm is. And even if the paper is very well done, the paper can get rejected. Not always, but can get rejected. So whichever journal you are submitting to, read the current edition, see how papers are being presented, how long the intro is, how they are pitching the marginal contribution, how are the table structure. Like in finance, nobody really has this H1, H2, H3 hypothesis kind of style anymore. In strategy and marketing you may, in finance you don't. So if you have the style, again the chances that the paper will get killed even before somebody gives a careful review is going to be very high. And most importantly, you have to keep reinventing and learning new things. Unfortunately, this is a profession that is demanding. Every 5-6 years, new things will emerge, new tools will emerge. Gen AI is a tool I think in my view we need to embrace. We need to learn to use it a little bit better. It's here to stay. So you need to keep reinventing yourself. Common pitfalls to avoid: waiting for the perfect idea. There is no perfect idea. Ideas, diligence leads to perfection. Working in isolation, unfortunately, I'm sorry if you don't have a lot of people to talk to, but it's tougher. Try to have a network across schools. So most of a network is not within ISB, it's across schools. You don't need to have a narrow early specialization. You will develop a specialization over time. I obviously care about policy relevance. A lot of academics will say only focus on academic work, not policy relevant work. I don't care about it. I like to do work at the intersection of academics and policy relevance. I'll repeat this. You can't avoid risk. The best idea will come from taking risk, especially when you're younger. As you get older, your risk appetite will go down. Be bold and be ambitious. Don't compare yourself to others. You only see the CV, the good parts. All my failures and killed projects you don't observe on my CV. It's just like Facebook and Instagram. You only see everybody's happy. Nobody's getting divorced, nobody's fighting. You go to their home, you figure out the truth. Managing multiple projects, going back to Professor Sunil. This is not for people in first or second year, but for people 4th, 5th year onwards. You need to think of a portfolio. So you need to have, I'm giving you a prescription, unfortunately, despite it being research. You should be having 1-2 projects close to submission or hopefully better under review continuously. If you don't have anything under review, that's a bad sign for your career. About 2-3 projects in active development that are getting closer but are not finalized yet. And then a few very early stage exploratory projects. So think of this as a portfolio. In terms of the questions also, few ambitious questions, but to be able to ask ambitious questions, you also need to survive. So few questions that will help you survive as well. So as I said, patterns will emerge slowly. Looking back, my path to me, not to the outside world, seemed logical. But when I was working through it, it felt very chaotic. I did not have a vision. I did not have a theme connecting various projects. So I'll just end with this. Research is not a straight line. It is not meant to be. The pipeline doesn't exist at the start. You build it one question at a time, and it is mostly about exploration. If you are naturally curious and you are willing to explore and willing to put in the hard work, diligence to learn new tools, your pipeline will emerge very organically. You can't see the connection now, but you will be able to see the connection in future. Just like it happened with Steve Jobs, it will happen with us as well. Thank you all for your patience. As usual, I want to
Thank you so much, Professor Alok, for the incredible, insightful session on the art of building research pipeline. Your practical wisdom and research experience have given us invaluable guidance that will carry forward in our own academic journey. Now, I would like to invite Professor Sujit R. Jagdale, Dean Academics IIM Amritsar, to come forward and facilitate Professor Alok with a token of our appreciation. Now, may I request all the participants to kindly move to CR6 for the closing ceremony. Thank you. As we draw the 5th International Conference on the Management of MSMEs to a close, we now turn to our distinguished academic perspective to share their reflections on the deliberations, insights, and outcomes that have shaped these past few days. At this junction, it is my distinct pleasure to invite Professor Sujit R. Jagdale, Dean Academics and Associate Professor in the area of Marketing at IIM Amritsar, to address this gathering. Professor Jagdale holds a doctorate from IMA and brings a rich interdisciplinary perspective to his academic and scholarly pursuits. His research spans market dynamics, marginalized consumer segments, and qualitative research methodologies, with his work published in reputed journals and presented across international academic platforms. Through his teaching, research, and academic stewardship, Professor Jagdale consistently underscores the importance of integrating theoretical rigor with real-world relevance, making his reflection especially apt as we conclude this conference. May I request Professor Jagdale to kindly address the gathering.
My address I will read to the respected director, I think in absence here. His name is Yes. Colleagues, scholars, practitioners, I think we don't have many here now. And all dear participants, volunteers, students, doctors, scholars. As we arrive at the closing of this 5th version of ICMM and second version of Dr. Colloquium, it is both a privilege and a responsibility to reflect on what these 3 days have actually meant intellectually, socially, of course, because my research fall in that domain, and even nationally. The very theme, the reimagining MSMEs, pathways to growth and innovation, wasn't treated here as a slogan, but as a serious scholarly and policy problem. Across sessions we saw, I did not attend many, but I was just going through the, and across sessions we saw MSMEs not as a residual actors in the economy, but as institutional infrastructure of inclusive capitalism, and that is very much important even today when we talk about the crony capitalism across. What this conference essentially revealed through the panel discussions, more than 60 papers, those were presented here. The 3 powerful shifts. The first shift is MSMEs are no longer being studied only as small firms. They are being studied, analyzed as systems. So from AI and small business transformation, we had very interesting talk by professor from, I just forgot his name, but professor from University of Maryland, to digital finance and inclusive credit. We saw that MSMEs are not just marginal units, they are the connective tissues of Indian economy. They connect villages to markets, households to income, skills to dignity, and innovation to livelihood. The second theme which essentially emerged from the discussions which we had and the presentations is MSMEs are where growth and justice intersect. This is perhaps the most important side because we often talk about growth and equity as trade-offs. What this conference has shown is that MSMEs are one of the few institutional forms where growth can be simultaneously productive and distributive. So it distributes income across the regions, distribute employment, distribute entrepreneurship, and distribute innovation. In other words, MSMEs democratize capital and capitalism. So MSMEs are not just a third theme, MSMEs are not just economic units, they are social infrastructures. They shape migration, gender participation, caste mobility, because I work on caste. I think we did not have many papers here. Probably next year I myself will present how MSMEs help caste mobility, the upward caste mobility. Skilling and intergenerational mobility. They are sites where dignity is produced or denied, where inclusion is practiced or withheld, where futures are made or foreclosed. This is why MSMEs matter, not just for GDP, but what kind of society we become. See, the idea of Vikasit Bharat is often framed in terms of global competitiveness, technological leadership, very hard and soft infrastructure and expansion, scale and speed. Yes, of course, all of that matter. But can India, this question we need to ask, can India be truly developed if development is spatially, that is geographically concentrated, socially unequal, and institutionally exclusive? I think MSMEs provide very different imagination and perspective for our development. So they, of course, represent decentralized production, regionally embedded growth, and culturally grounded innovation. Vikasit Bharat built only on mega cities, unicorns, and capital-intensive industries risk becoming polarized Bharat. A Vikasit Bharat built on or with MSMEs becomes a distributed Bharat, where development is not only faster but fairer. See, MSMEs and the democratization, no other institutional form in India has the income democratizing capacity that MSMEs do. Large firms typically concentrate income, public employment they stabilize income, and MSMEs they spread income. So in this sense, MSMEs do something very rare. They make growth very thick, not just tall. They convert macro growth into micro livelihoods. They ensure that when India grows, Indians grow with it, or Bharat grow with it. This is the deepest political and social contribution which MSMEs can have. See, here scholarship during last almost 2.5 days, they moved beyond romanticism. So it did not idealize MSMEs. We studied the constraints, we presented the constraints. We moved beyond technocracy. Essentially, we did not treat MSMEs as engineering problem to be fixed by policy alone. We moved beyond silos. This is what essentially all these papers which we presented here, and this is what serious knowledge look like. Connected, very reflexive, and responsible. I think I have a word for doctoral scholars here. You're not just building careers. Robin is around. Robin, you remember the question which I asked you during your, So you're building the intellectual architecture of India's future economy. Your work matters, and of course not our work matters. Because you are naming what was invisible, theorizing what was taken for granted, measuring what was ignored, and questioning what was normalized. So we had very mesmerizing talk by Shashwat. So do not underestimate this. Knowledge is a form of infrastructure. Ideas are public goods. Theory shapes policy. Even when policy may not necessarily know it, stay curious, stay critical, and more importantly, stay grounded. Of course, one reject makes us more grounded. Every reject makes us more grounded. What lies ahead? As we leave here, let me suggest 3 commitments we take forward. First, keep MSMEs at the center of development thinking, not just as an afterthought. Keep connecting disciplines, of course, the interdiscipline. Even I don't know where did you get my introduction from, but interdiscipline is the right word. Because MSMEs are not one discipline problem. And keep remembering that markets are social institutions. Markets do not Of course, Shashwat would have a little different view than me. Markets do not function only on efficiency. They are socio-culturally situated institutions. So let me close with this thought that India's future will not be built only in boardrooms or policy corridors or tech campuses. It will be built in small workshops, family enterprises, rural clusters, women-run micro ventures, SHG groups, I think Director was mentioning about it, artisan collectives, informal markets finding formal futures. This is the world of MSMEs, and that is the world this conference has taken extremely seriously. This is the 5th version, I think, something to patter backs. Thank you for 3 days of thought, dialogue, disagreement, discovery, and hope. Thank you for reminding us that that development is not just about becoming richer, but about becoming fairer, wiser, and more human. I thank you all for being here, having come from all across the region, and wishing you all the safe journey and intellectually extremely restless year ahead. Thank you so very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Professor Jitale, for your insightful and thoughtful reflection. Your address has provided a fitting and meaningful closure to the discussion over the past few days, reinforcing the key themes and learnings that have emerged from ICMM and DocColl 2026. We deeply appreciate your time, guidance, and continued support. We now arrive at one of the most anticipated moments of ICMM 2026, the Best Paper Award ceremony, celebrating scholarly excellence across the doctoral curriculum and conference tracks. Over the course of conference, we have engaged with research marked by originality, analytical depth, and strong contextual relevance. These awards recognize not only academic merit, but also ideas that hold the potential to influence future research, policy, and managerial practices. At this juncture, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Sujit R. Jagdale, Dean Academics, Indian Institute of Management, Amritsar, to kindly join us and felicitate the award ceremony. Along with him, may I also invite Mr. Krishna Kumar, Circle Head, Punjab National Bank, Amritsar, to join us on the stage, and Kapil Gandhi, DY Circle Head, PNB, Amritsar. Mr. Kumar is a seasoned banking professional with over 23 years of experience in the banking sector. Currently as Circle Head of Amritsar Circle, he oversees 105 branches and brings deep operational and strategic expertise to his group. He has spent close to 11 years in risk management, holding senior position in India. We shall begin with the doctoral colloquium Best Paper Award. The Best Paper Award is presented to Tejas C. Nair. The topic presented is Marketing. For first runner-up, we have Archana Kumari from Amritsar. award for ICMM 2026 Competence Track. The second prize goes to Bhavna Sehgal for decoding the dynamics of load shedding in MSMEs, the systematic analysis. For the first prize, we have Gauba Rasool, Anjali Pathania, Avantika. Congratulations to all the awardees on this well-deserved recognition. May we please give out all awardees a warm round of applause for their remarkable We also extend our sincere appreciation to every participant whose research and engagement enriched the intellectual disclosure of ICMM 2026. To formally conclude the proceedings, may I invite Professor Riya Singla, Chairperson ICMM, to kindly deliver the vote of
So, good afternoon, everybody. We are here, and I know we are all waiting for the lunchtime to start. But let me just take 2 minutes of your day, and then we can all proceed towards lunch. As we conclude these 3-day interactions of ICMM and DocColl 2026, my heart is full of gratitude to a lot of people. As they say that it takes a village to raise a child, and I think it takes an army to organize a conference. It's just that we do all these things so that we can stimulate academic interaction, that we get to meet a lot more people and network with a lot more people coming from various backgrounds and coming from working on various kinds of projects. And I think these 3 days have been absolutely enriching for each one of us with various keynote speeches and with guest sessions. So I will send off my first set of gratitude to our keynote speakers, Professor Balaji, who joined us from University of Manchester, Professor Sodakare, who joined us here for another keynote from Indian School of Business, and all our 4 guest speakers, Professor Ranjit Nambudiri, Professor Sanjeev Tripathi, Professor Shashwat Alok, and Professor Joshi Jacob. And I believe all their sessions were absolutely enriching and helpful to each one of us who are struggling with each day in certain other aspects of academia. And just moving forward, Indian Institute of Management, Amritsar, organized this conference. This is the 5th edition. And I am fortunate to say that I had a team, and I was one of those fortunate ones who worked with a team of 2 former ICMM chairpersons, Professor Ashwati and Professor Sanket. And I'm absolutely grateful to all my team members, which includes Professor Sunil, who I know has moderated the panel discussion very beautifully. And I cannot miss Professor Jagriti Srivastava, Chairperson Doctoral Program, who's been the backbone for Doctoral Colloquium and has been helping all our doctoral students all along. So I really thank all my ICMM 2026 organizing committee, Professor Sanket, Professor Ashwati, Professor Sunil, and Professor Jagriti. Thank you so much. And as we move forward, it is my honor to also thank our support staff, which includes our director's office, which includes our purchase office, which includes our IT department, our finance office, and all of them, even hospitality, who have been the backbone to organize and facilitate teas and coffees for each one of us, and I am thankful to each one of you. Last but not the least, we can do a little, but I think the major handholding and the major groundwork is laid out by an army of our very, very I'm fortunate to work with a lot of them. I just want to mention two names, Miss Mansi and Mr. Sandeep, who's been with us from the beginning, who have received our panic calls late at the night and have sort of navigated through our panic calls. So, and before I conclude, I would also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Anmesh Sen. They've been absolutely sincere in managing everything and have also calmed us down at certain points. And 50mm MPRC, without them, everything that you see here would not have been possible. And also our other student volunteers who have joined us for ICMM and have helped us to make it even more successful. Thank you, each one of you. The participants who traveled across the country, come to Amritsar in such a cold weather, have been with us throughout the Vaga trip and the dinner. And I am actually grateful to all of you to make through these 3 days, which have been absolutely chilly for all of us. Thank you so much. As we formally conclude ICMM DocColl 2026, we all sort of welcome you to lunch that we have in the canteen here. And thank you so much once again.
हम लोग कल 4 बजे की फ्लाइट अभी शाम का बोला था आप जो बताओगे वहाँ चलते हैं